Grace, peace, and mercy all. Pastor Chris here from Spruce Run Lutheran. So we received another Ask the Pastor. The question is, do Lutherans fast for Lent? Now, the short answer is yes. That's right, get your 18 seconds and you're done. That's the simple answer there. But, let's kind of dive into it a little bit. First off, I get how people can feel uncomfortable with fasting, with sort of a lot of the Lenten disciplines, right? That Lent itself kind of feels worksy, right? That we're trying to do something in our faith. And in fact, we're doing something, right? We're giving something up. We're reading more scripture. We're doing whatever the thing is we're doing something. And for Lutherans, that can always feel a little funny because one of our main worries is that we can kind of go in the wrong direction and can start to assume things we do save us, right? That was the founding principle was going against that working assumption. So it's easy to get there. And I think that's why one of the wise things the larger church does is every Lent, we read Matthew 6 as our Ash Wednesday gospel lesson, right? So we're reading this portion of scripture where Jesus talks about ways to do religion poorly or do religion well, do prayer, do fasting, do alms well instead of in a way that is hypocritical. Right, so that's the starting point for us in Scripture as we go on our Lenten journey, as we do Lenten things, we sort of increase or change in some way, shape, or form how we act as spiritual people for the 40 days of Lent. Right, so all that just to say that Matthew 6 is read in order to make sure we're not doing things during Lent in a hypocritical way. It sort of guards against works righteousness. At least that's the goal there, I think. So just very briefly, thinking about fasting itself before we expand out into other Lenten practices. So fasting is simply abstaining from something that separates you from God, from neighbor, or from creation, right? Sometimes we get funny ideas about fasting that, it becomes sort of a diet or something. And that's a more secular understanding of fasting. But at base, you're looking at things or actions that damage relationship with God, neighbor, creation. And you take some time to avoid those things for a season, right? So, and I think that when that's your main goal is making for right relationships, that's pretty great. It's when you're trying to make it something that you get to boast about, that you get to, constantly be showing off about, that things can kind of go in the wrong direction. So, as I mentioned very briefly earlier, the three traditional things that Christians do to sort of mark the 40 days of Lent are prayer, fasting, and alms. And these are the three things that Jesus describes on one hand, here's how it can be done wrong, also here's how you ought to in fact be doing it. So sometimes people take these three actions and they kind of combine them in a variety of ways. In one way, I would suggest you all think about fasting. One option is to combine fasting with alms. So alms is collecting money for a person or an organization in order to help them out. So one way that you can do fasting well is to give something up, and then the money you save during the 40 days by not consuming that thing, you give to, a local food pantry, a hunger organization, whatever it would be, some sort of good organization, or just an individual who is in need. You're able to give based off of what you yourself have given up. Now, here at Spruce Run, on one hand, I'm always, every Ash Wednesday, we notice those three traditional things that people do, alms, fasting, and prayer. But another option, and one that I'm going to be encouraging folk here at Spruce Run to do, is conversation, reading, and discernment. These are three things that, as we're going through a program called Faithful Journey, we've been learning how to do. There's a small cohort of us that have been learning how to do these things well. So those of you that notice here in the background, we have these marbles. These are our God conversation marbles, that when you have a good conversation with somebody about God, about values, about what people's goals are, what they're up to in life, these really deep conversations, you take one from here and you move it over here, right? So you mark that, and we're hoping to do 120 of them. And if every ELCA congregation had 120 God conversations, there would be 1 million God conversations here in the United States. And that would be kind of a cool thing that I think would revive the church in a variety of ways. So these God conversations, on one hand, are about kind of dealing with our Lutheran laryngitis, the idea that Lutherans don't talk about their faith with other people. Once every 23 years, the average Lutheran talks to somebody else about their faith, which is, we can do better, right? So on one hand, maybe Lent can be a time where you cure your Lutheran laryngitis, but also it's a good time to learn about your neighbors, what God's already up to in the world, what God is doing in our neighbors' lives, and joining in that, right? That's a very Lutheran kind of thing to do. You ask, your kingdom come, it's already going to come, but can it come for me as well? So we get to enter into what God's already doing with our neighbors. Secondly is reading. So reading scripture, it's a good thing. And I think everybody can do a little more of it. We can both read widely, right? Read whole chunks of scripture. I have a couple different books of the Bible that I'm recommending people read during Lent. One of them being Acts, another one being Exodus, because they're both 40-chapter books. But also reading deeply. So reading and rereading pieces of scripture that strike you and asking what their calling is on your life. And then thirdly, the other thing I'm encouraging folk to do is discernment. So taking some time and really thinking during these 40 days, thinking about what are the needs of the world around us? What are the things that the world is beckoning and asking and pleading to be done? But then secondly, what are things that you're skilled at? What are things that people say, hey, you're really good at whatever the thing is? So that's part of what you'll be trying to figure out during the season of Lent. And then thirdly, what brings you joy? What are the things that when you're doing them, you enter into sort of a flow state, right? That you don't even realize how much time's went by because you've done the thing and you just got into doing the thing really well. So again, I maybe made this answer a little longer than it needed to be, but the short answer of the whole thing is, yes, Lutherans can fast, and fasting is about relationship, not about just sort of giving a thing up for the sake of giving a thing up. Next, that there are 3 traditional things to do during the season of Lent, which is prayer, fasting, and alms. And then finally, that I'm encouraging the folk in my sort of area of influence, on one hand, the congregation being the obvious one, but all of you out there in internet land as well, is maybe for the season of Lent, try having God conversations, reading scripture more deeply, and taking time to discern what God is calling you to do in this time and in this place. Thanks much, and have a wonderful day. God bless.